The sky over New York that night didn't just rain, it roared, as if trying to tear the skyline apart.
Wind screamed through the drenched streets, dragging trash and car horns into a single chaotic symphony. Streetlights flickered like the heartbeat of a city on the verge of losing control. Katherine Sullivan stood under the awning of Sullivan Arts Gallery, clutching her camera bag, rainwater dripping down her collar.
Her first photo exhibition had ended in quiet disaster. 17 guests came. 16 left without even asking the price of a single print. She gave a bitter smile. 6 months chasing her project, The Walls of Gentrified Brooklyn, and all it earned her were a few polite, impressive work comments. She unlocked her phone. Uber's estimate made her swallow hard $47 to get home. Too expensive, she muttered, glancing outside streetlights bending, thunder growling, but cheaper than freezing to death out here. When she hit confirm, a message appeared. Due to severe weather, your ride will be shared with another passenger. 20% discount applied. Perfect, Katherine sighed. Misery loves company, I guess. 15 minutes later, a black Cadillac pulled up, sending water splashing over the curb. The driver, a weary middle-aged man, gripped the steering wheel as if afraid it might vanish. Katherine. Yes. There's one more pickup, he rasped. We're getting him on 57th. She nodded, pulling her coat tighter. The car's warmth barely chased away the chill before the rain outside grew even heavier.
Through the fogged glass, the city lights melted like watercolor.
The car stopped in front of an upscale Italian restaurant, La Ventura. The door opened, and a man stepped in.
Tall, broad-shouldered, his black suit clung to him, soaked but still perfectly tailored.
His cologne mixed with the scent of rain and something else of faint metallic tang. His eyes brushed past hers just a second, but enough to knock her pulse off rhythm. Apologies, he said, voice smooth and deep like aged whiskey. Thanks for sharing the ride. No problem, she replied, her tone unsteady. He leaned back, gaze fixed out the rain-streaked window. Streetlights danced across his cheekbones, dangerously handsome. Where are you headed? She asked, breaking the silence. Upper East Side. Short, measured, not an invitation for conversation. I'm in Tribeca, she offered. Guess we're not exactly on the same route. The wind's changed, he said quietly. Sometimes a detour is the safest road. The driver cleared his throat. Mr. Hayes, you sure about this way there's a lockdown on 8th Avenue? Katherine frowned slightly. Mr. Hayes? That sounded oddly respectful. A flash of lightning split the sky, illuminating his face. For a heartbeat, Katherine saw a red stain spreading across his sleeve. Blood. Her chest tightened. You're hurt. He glanced down, then gave a faint smile, dismissive, almost amused. It's nothing. Blood is never nothing. He tilted his head, those steel-gray eyes resting on her deep and still as dark water. Do you always speak that bluntly? Photography taught me that. Cameras hate liars. A ghost of a smirk curved his lips thin, like a blade's edge. Good. Honesty's rare these days. Suddenly, sirens wailed behind them. 2 SUVs sped past, tires hissing through puddles. Katherine glanced sideways. He didn't flinch, only tightened his left hand. A silver ring gleamed engraved with the letters H. What do you do for a living? Import and export. What kind? The kind that requires discretion. He said it lightly, but something cold rippled through the air after those words. As the car crossed the Manhattan Bridge, thunder rattled the frame. The driver started to turn when a pickup truck skidded sideways, blocking the road. Damn it, he shouted, yanking the wheel. The Cadillac spun once. Katherine lurched forward, and a strong arm pulled her back. He shielded her, body pressed close, his breath warm against her neck, the scent of rain and blood mixing in the air too real, too human. The car jolted to a stop. Outside, shouting erupted. Metal crashed. Then a gunshot. Down. He shoved her onto the seat. Glass shattered. A bullet tore through the window. The driver screamed. The car swerved again. Katherine gasped, heart pounding like thunder. What's happened? Quiet. Don't look up. His voice was low, sharp, commanding.
Out of the corner of her eye, she saw him pull something from his coat, a matte black pistol.
Rain hammered the car like a drum. He peered out, eyes hard. Calm, the look of someone familiar with danger. We have to move, now! When he opened the door, wind and rain crashed in. Can you run? I think so. Then follow me. Don't stop. Don't ask questions. If I say duck, you duck. She only managed a nod. He took her hand firm, steady. They ran into the storm, 2 shadows swallowed by flashing red lights and chaos. Every step splashed. Every breath carried the taste of gunpowder and fear. He yanked her into an alley, pressed her against the wall. Lightning flared, revealing his face, rain mixed with blood trailing from his temple. "Who are you?" she whispered between gasps. He met her gaze, voice gravelly and deliberate. "Lucas Hayes." The name echoed in her mind like a warning. She'd heard it before faintly, in an old article about the Hayes dynasty, the East Coast's hidden empire. But no, impossible. The man before her soaked, trembling slightly from the cold, looked too human, too real to be that underworld legend. Lightning again. And she caught at a faint tattoo on his wrist, 3 slashed lines, intersecting like a blood oath. He noticed her stare, lowered his arm.
You weren't supposed to know my name.
Well, now I do. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, no longer strangers, but 2 people trapped in the same fate. Far off, sirens wailed. Lucas gave a tired, half-sardonic smile. The game started. Katherine Sullivan?
What game?
The one no one leaves without losing a piece of their heart. The storm raged on. But within its fury, Katherine saw something in Lucas's eyes, not just darkness, but a flicker of light. The look of someone who had been hurt beyond repair, and was still trying to find the way back. She didn't know it yet, but that single rain-soaked ride would change her life forever. Sometimes, fate doesn't knock. It just sits beside you in a car during a storm. If you believe every encounter has a reason, join me in Part 2, Blood in the Rain, where the first secret begins to unravel. The storm that night felt endless. Rain dripped from the roof onto a rusted sheet of metal, echoing through the dark alley, a lonely rhythm in a city writhing under thunder. Katherine leaned against the cold brick wall, her coat soaked through, hands clutching her camera, the only thing that still gave her a sense of control. In front of her, Lucas Hayes crouched beside a shattered window, watching the dark, empty street outside. Lightning flashed, revealing droplets of blood falling from his wrist onto the cracked concrete. He had stripped off his vest, rolled up his sleeves, and exposed a deep gash across his right arm. "You need stitches," Katherine said softly, her voice almost drowned by the rain. Lucas didn't turn around. "You deal with blood often." "No, but I used to shoot in conflict zones." "Then you know no one survives by waiting for someone else to save them." She fell silent. Somehow, that single line made her respect him more than she wanted to admit.
On a dusty wooden table, she found an abandoned first aid kit, a few rolls of gauze, alcohol, and a sewing needle. "Roll your sleeve up," she said, her tone more command than request.
Lucas studied her for a moment, then obeyed. When her fingers brushed his skin, both of them froze. His skin was hot, his pulse strong. She could feel the heartbeat of a man who seemed to belong to a world most people only whispered about.
You're not planning to tell me the truth, are you?
About who I am. About who you're running from. Lucas gave a faint smile. It wasn't cold, as she expected, but weary, the smile of someone who'd lived too long with danger. Have you ever looked through your lens, Katherine, and realized there are things you shouldn't capture? Yes, she said, sewing the first stitch, but I still take the shot, because if no one dares to record it, no one will ever know it existed. He watched her long enough that she had to lower her eyes to escape that gaze. When the wound was finally bandaged, Lucas murmured, "Thank you." "Do you say that often?" "Never, not before you." The words hit her harder than she expected. Her pulse fluttered even as her mind screamed, "Don't get drawn in." She stood and walked to the doorway, peering at the flooded street below. Car lights flickered in the distance, sirens echoed, but this place seemed untouched by the chaos outside. "Where are we?" "One of the old warehouses on the East River," Lucas said. "Family property?" "The Hayes family," she asked, her voice tightening. He didn't answer, but the look he gave her was enough. "They say the Hayeses controlled the New York docks for 40 years. Katherine continued quietly, then vanished after the patriarch died. "That was your father, wasn't it?" Lucas looked up, his eyes sharp and metallic. "You've read more than I expected. I was a journalist before I became a photographer. And now you plan to write about me. I don't know. Maybe you're just a man running from something." He chuckled softly, a dry, almost sad sound. "You see more than most people dare to." Silence filled the room, broken only by rain and the sound of their breathing. Lucas sat down on a wooden chair and unbuttoned his collar, revealing a long scar slashing across his chest, faded but old years old. "You know what's funny?" he asked, voice low. "What?" "I thought I died that night 15 years ago. There was an explosion at the docks. But someone pulled me out of the wreckage. A little girl with brown hair, wearing a red coat. Her face was covered in tears and ash." He gave a tired smile. "Sometimes I think, if I ever meet her again, I'll thank her for giving me another chance." Katherine froze. A memory struck a winter night, the sound of an explosion near the harbor, her father dragging her away, and the sight of a boy trapped beneath burning metal. She had pulled him out, her small hands blistered by fire. She had never forgotten those wild blue eyes.
What's wrong? Lucas asked, noticing her pale face.
Nothing, she whispered. You remembered someone. Just a memory. She turned away, her heart pounding. It couldn't be. The world was too big for coincidences like this. And yet, somewhere deep inside, she knew there's no such thing as coincidence. By dawn, the rain softened into a silken drizzle. Lucas stood by the window, city lights shimmering on puddles outside. You should go home, he said. I'll have someone take you safely. And you? I've got loose ends to clean up. She stepped closer, close enough to feel his breath.
You know you talk like someone planning to disappear?
That's what I do best. And living? Are you good at that too? He turned, eyes gentler now. I'm learning. With you. The words fell between them like a misplaced arrow short, simple, but buried deep. Katherine didn't know how to answer. He reached up and brushed her cheek. His hand was cold, but the touch burned warm. Don't look at me like that. Katherine, he murmured. When you do, I forget who I am. She breathed, voice barely above a whisper. Maybe you just need to remember who you want to be.
A car horn echoed outside. Lucas stiffened, eyes sharpening again. He pulled out his phone, glanced at it for a second, then slid it away.
They're here, my men. She nodded, slowly packing her camera, though her mind was crowded with unspoken questions. At the door, he paused. Without turning, he said quietly, If anyone asks, you never met me. You were just a passenger in a storm. And if I don't want to forget. Lucas said nothing. The faint dawn light traced his silhouette, gilding him in a soft silver glow. When the storm passes, he said, you'll understand why I had to vanish. The door shut. His footsteps faded down the hall, leaving only his scent rain and cologne lingering in the air.
Katherine sank into the chair, hands trembling, unsure if it was from the cold or from the storm still raging inside her chest, that strange, undeniable pull.
She turned on her camera. Amid dozens of blurred shots, one image stood out. Lucas, head bowed beneath the flicker of a single bulb, half his face hidden in shadow, the other bathed in silver rain. His eyes didn't look at the lens, yet somehow they found her across the distance, across every secret. She stared at that photo for a long time, until the first morning light crept through the cracked window. And in her chest, a quiet certainty began to bloom. This was only the beginning. The real storm had yet to pass. The rain had stopped, but the city hadn't yet found its rhythm again.
Post-storm, New York felt like someone waking from a fevered dream, weary, damp, and half lost in a veil of fog that hung low over the streets. Katherine sat in a small cafe on the corner of Bleecker Street, a cup of cappuccino cooling untouched before her.
Her camera rested on the table beside her, a silent witness to the chaos of the previous night. She opened her laptop, fingers hovering above the keyboard. On the screen, dozens of photos, broken headlights, people running, and his face. Lucas Hayes, the man who had stepped out of darkness like a storm-given form. She searched the name online. The results were fragments old, scattered, vague, the Hayes family legend of an underground empire. No photos, no recent data, just decade-old reports about an explosion at the New York docks where only one teenage boy had survived. Her heartbeat quickened. She remembered what he'd said the night before 15 years ago. Someone pulled me out of the wreckage. She drew in a sharp breath. Impossible. And yet, instinct whispered that the thread between them hadn't begun in last night's rain. The cafe door opened, the bell chiming softly. Katherine looked up and froze. Lucas walked in. A gray coat, collar turned up to his jaw, hair still damp from mist. His gaze swept the room, found her, and without hesitation, he approached. You really don't know how to stay out of trouble, do you? His voice was low, smooth, carrying a chill like winter air. I'm just having coffee. In a cafe 2 blocks from the city's media office, where at least 4 reporters are covering last night's riot. Katherine blinked. Are you following me? No, he said calmly, stirring sugar into her cup as if it were a habit. Just passing by? Lucky coincidence. Lucky she raised a brow. You talk as if everything in your life is prearranged. He looked up, gray-blue eyes glinting beneath the warm light. In my world, nothing is coincidence, especially when it involves you. Silence stretched. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall.
Katherine felt her chest tighten. The way he said it too natural, too intimate, as though something between them had existed long before that storm.
Why did you save me that night? She asked quietly. Because you looked at me differently. You think I wasn't afraid? Oh, you were, he smiled faintly, but you were afraid of the right person. His words hung somewhere between humor and confession. Katherine couldn't tell if what she felt was curiosity, trust, or something dangerously close to surrender. Who do you work for? Lucas. I work for myself. And your work exactly is keeping order where the law can't reach. He said it as if it were perfectly ordinary.
Katherine studied him the paradox that was Lucas Hayes. Predator and protector, ruthless, yet restrained, dangerous, yet strangely kind.
Do you ever wish you were normal? Lucas paused, a shadow of a smile flickering. Normal people don't survive in my world. Maybe not, but they sleep at night. He looked toward the window, watching snow dissolve against the glass. I don't need sleep. I just need to forget. Something inside her twisted. His voice carried a weariness that made her want to reach into the darkness he lived in, even if it burned her. You could tell me, she whispered, just once. You wouldn't like the story. Let me decide that. Lucas leaned back. His eyes were deep, the kind of depth that hid both memory and regret. My father ran the docks. People called him a businessman. In truth, he controlled nearly half the illegal cargo that entered this city. His tone dropped. When I was 13, there was an explosion. It killed almost everyone. I survived. Someone pulled me out. After that, I stopped being a child. Katherine went still. Each word felt like a puzzle piece clicking into place, forming a picture she hadn't expected to find herself in. The little girl, 10 years old, standing in fire, pulling a boy from burning steel that girl had been her. She inhaled sharply, her fingers brushing the inside of her left wrist, the faint scar still there. A remnant of that night. She said nothing, couldn't, because he hadn't realized it yet. Lucas stood. You should leave. Someone will be here in 10 minutes. I don't want you involved. Where are you going? There's something I need to take care of. A friend of mine wasn't as lucky as I was. Another explosion. He gave her a look part surprise, part admiration. You should use that intuition for your art. Katherine, not for people like me. He placed a black business card on the table, nothing but a number engraved in silver 225, 470, 8910.
Call only if you have to, and when you do, don't say my name.
Then he left. His figure melted into the crowd outside, fading like smoke into the pale morning mist. Katherine sat there, staring at the card under the yellow light. Her emotions rose and tangled fear, intrigue, and something unnamed that she was too afraid to call by its real name. She knew she should run, forget him. But something inside refused to let go. She slipped the card into her wallet, turned on her camera, and scrolled through last night's photos. One frame made her pause. The angle was off. The light fractured, but there he was, Lucas, his face half in shadow. And behind him, reflected in a shattered mirror, another figure. Someone holding a gun. Her pulse spiked. So it wasn't random. Someone had tried to kill him and failed. She zoomed in. On the attacker's sleeve was a small emblem, a silver hawk clutching an arrow. She'd never seen it before, but instinct told her this was no ordinary threat. And Lucas, the man without a past, was standing at the center of a storm she was now unknowingly stepping into. Outside, the snow thickened. Katherine pulled her collar up and stepped into the crowd. In her pocket, the card felt cold metallic, like a silent invitation to a world where light and shadow intertwined. And somewhere across the city, still damp from the storm, Lucas Hayes stood at the window of a high-rise building, cigarette glowing between his fingers. He closed his eyes and drew in a long breath as if, through the chill of the wind, he could still feel her presence. The woman who had re-entered his life a second time and would not leave as easily as he once believed. Saturday morning? The sky was clear, sunlight dripping like honey over the red brick rooftops of West Village. There was no trace left of the storm from the night before, only the lingering chill in the air, and the smell of toasted bread wafting from the small street where Katherine always stopped by. She pushed open the door to Margaret's oven, the bakery that somehow always felt warmer than the world outside. Morning, sweetheart, said Margaret, a small woman with silver hair and that unmistakable New York accent, smiling as she kneaded the dough. Haven't seen you in a while. Katherine smiled back, trying to hide the fatigue behind her eyes. I needed a little peace. Well, you'll find plenty of that here, though you look like someone who's just fought a hurricane. Maybe, Katherine murmured, just not the kind outside. When Margaret disappeared into the kitchen, Katherine sat by the window, opened her notebook, and tried to write a few lines for her next feature article. But just as her pen touched the page, the doorbell chimed again. Lucas Hayes walked in. He wasn't in a suit this time. Just jeans and a gray shirt, sleeves rolled up, collar undone simple enough to pass for an ordinary man. But no, ordinary men didn't make time slow down when they entered a room. Black coffee, no sugar, he said in that deep, familiar tone, then his gaze found her. You still like sitting by the window? Katherine gave a faint smile. And you still like appearing as if nothing ever happened? He pulled out the chair across from her, without asking. I heard the bread here's the best in the neighborhood. Who told you that? The woman who once saved my life? Katherine frowned. Margaret? He nodded. She's the only person who's ever made me believe this world still has kindness in it. Before she could reply, Margaret returned with a tray of golden, freshly baked bread. Well, if it isn't Mr. Hayes, she beamed, setting the tray down. What a coincidence you came just in time for the first batch. You two know each other? Katherine asked, surprised. Of course we do. This gentleman comes every week to buy bread for the orphanage in Brooklyn. And every year, someone sends money anonymously to fix their roof. But I know it's him. Margaret smiled kindly. You can't hide a good heart for long. Lucas gave a small, sheepish smile. Katherine stayed silent. A man like him with blood on his hands and shadows at his back, quietly doing good. It was contradictory. And yet, it made it impossible for her to look away. After Margaret went back inside, silence returned. Lucas tore off a piece of bread and handed it to her. Try it. She says you can only taste the soul of the flour while it's still warm.
Katherine took a bite. Soft, sweet, warm like a memory from childhood.
You really come here every week. Yeah, this place makes me feel forgiven. He said it lightly, but the words pressed against her heart. What did you do that needs forgiving? He said nothing. The sunlight caught half his face, casting both truth and deceit in equal measure. There are things I had to do to keep a promise to someone who's gone, he said at last. Who? You don't need to know. Katherine flinched slightly. He had never called her you like that before, soft, intimate, and yet it changed everything. She set her cup down, meeting his gaze. You think hiding the truth protects people? It doesn't. It only hurts them more. Lucas leaned back, a faint, sad smile curving his lips. If you knew who I really am, you'd walk away. And you think I don't already know? He frowned. I've read the files, the explosion, the Hayes family, the docs, and the rumors. Lucas said nothing, but his eyes deep, dark, and calm didn't waver. And yet you're still sitting here? Because I want to hear the part you didn't tell. He laughed a real laugh this time. You're more dangerous than I thought. No, she said softly. I just stopped being afraid of you. He tilted his head, voice low. That's the most dangerous thing of all. They stayed longer than either intended. Time drifted, cooling like forgotten coffee. Lucas spoke not of crime or power, but of fragments of a life long buried. Of a father who once told him, strength isn't in the gun, but in knowing when not to pull the trigger. Of a gentle mother, lost to the violence she tried to escape. Since then, he whispered, I've never believed in peace. Until I met you. Katherine looked down. Her heart ached, pulled taut by something fragile and foolish. She wanted to believe him, but she knew she shouldn't. The man sitting before her, no matter how gentle, still belonged to a world she couldn't fully understand. By the time they stepped outside, the sunlight had turned golden. Lucas handed her a small paper bag. For your breakfast tomorrow. You're leaving again, aren't you? He looked at her, the weight of something unspoken in his eyes. If I could, I'd stay. But there are things I can't walk away from. For who? For the one who died in my place? Katherine froze. He turned, took a few steps, then paused. But I'll come back, when it's done. And if I'm not here? He smiled faintly. Then I'll find you, no matter what it takes. She stood there, watching him disappear into the crowd. The wind carried the scent of bread, smoke, and the faint trace of his cologne. Margaret's words echoed in her mind. People come here for the bread, but they stay for the memories. And for Katherine, memory now had the face of Lucas Hayes. But something inside her whispered that memory would soon be stained with blood once more. That afternoon, when she returned to her small apartment in Tribeca, an envelope was waiting at her door. No name. Only a wax seal pressed with the image of a silver hawk clutching an arrow, the same emblem she'd seen in the photo days ago. She opened it. Inside was a grainy printed photograph. Lucas, talking to an unfamiliar man in a parking lot. On the back, a single line scrawled in messy handwriting. The man you trust betrayed his own blood. Don't let him fool you again. Katherine's hands trembled. She stared at the photo. Lucas's eyes in the picture not cold, not cruel, but the eyes of a man carrying unbearable guilt. She sank to the floor. Questions crashed through her mind. Who sent this? Why warn her? And worst of all, what if Lucas was hiding something he never intended her to know? Outside dusk thickened over the skyline. From the distance came the long, mournful sound of a ship's horn from the harbor, a sound as old as memory itself. Katherine closed her eyes, unease spreading through her chest like fog. Somewhere in the city, Lucas Hayes was walking into a war he might not survive. And she, the woman who swore to stay out of every tragedy, was about to become the heart of one. And as night fell over Manhattan, their love began to take on the color of fate. That night, Manhattan seemed to wear a different skin quiet, stripped of its glamour. Streetlights stretched across the avenue like tired ribbons of gold. Katherine stood by her apartment window, watching the few cars drift below. Since receiving that mysterious photo, her heart had not known rest. Each time she remembered the look in Lucas's eyes half-shadowed, half in pain, something inside her ached. Not because she doubted him, but because she feared she was starting to believe in a man who might be her undoing. A soft knock broke the silence. She froze. No one came at this hour. When she opened the door, Lucas stood there, drenched coat, pale face, eyes haunted and raw. "You, what are you doing here? I needed to see you." His voice was hoarse, low, the kind born from another kind of storm, not the one outside, but within him. She stepped aside quietly. He entered. The air between them was heavy, so still that the sound of a pin might have echoed. "You received something," Lucas said at last. "A photo." Katherine's breath caught. "You know?" He nodded. "They wanted to make you doubt me." Her tone stayed calm, though her hands trembled. "And they are. The men who once ran the docks with my father. They want me back or dead. And the man in that picture?" Lucas inhaled deeply, his gaze falling. "That was my brother." Katherine stared. "You have a brother?" "I did, or thought I did." His voice hardened like steel. "Elijah Hayes. He betrayed our family. He caused the explosion 15 years ago. I believed he was gone until they sent that photo to you." Katherine stepped back. Not from fear, but from the sudden realization that she had been drawn into something far beyond what she was ever ready to face. "You came here to protect me, or to make sure I stopped digging?" Lucas took a step closer, the distance between them narrowing to a breath. "Both," he murmured. "You're walking into a place where light doesn't exist. And I can't let you become part of that darkness." She lifted her chin, meeting his eyes. "But you were the one who led me there. You can't ask me to turn away now that I've seen who you really are." A faint, broken smile touched his lips. "And what if who I am can't even save himself? Then I'll do it for you." Her words froze him. The glow from the street lamps brushed across her face, fragile, but unwavering. He looked at her for a long time before reaching out. His hand trembled as it touched her cheek. "You don't know what you're saying, Katherine? In my world, love means loss. In mine," she whispered, "love means finding what you thought was gone." A single heartbeat of silence. Then he pulled her into his arms. Not with hunger, but with the desperation of someone who had been standing at the edge of the abyss too long, and finally found something solid to hold on to. She felt his heartbeat racing beneath his soaked shirt, heard the heaviness of his breathing, and in that moment she understood his pain more clearly than any confession could tell her. Time stopped inside that embrace. Outside, wind slipped through the window cracks, carrying the faint scent of old rain and neon light from the sleepless city. "You're not asking when I fell in love with you?" he murmured near her ear. She smiled faintly. "I don't want to know. Because if I asked, I'd have to admit, I loved you before I ever knew who you were." Lucas took her hand and led her to the balcony. Snowflakes drifted under the streetlights. From his pocket, he pulled out a small object, a simple silver ring, worn with age. "It was my mother's," he said softly. "She told me never to give it to someone unless I was ready to lose them forever." "And what are you doing now?" "Keeping my promise." He slid the ring onto her finger. "No proposal? No vows?" "Just a look, a promise spoken without words." "Are you afraid?" he asked quietly. "Of what?" "That this love will end in blood." Her lips curved into a tender smile, eyes glimmering like water reflecting light. "No one gets to choose how love ends. We only get to choose how it begins." Lucas bent down and pressed a kiss to her forehead, brief, trembling, yet filled with both surrender and longing. "You make me forget that there are still things in this world money can't buy. Power can't touch, only faith can hold." That night, they didn't sleep. They sat side by side, speaking of small things, the book she was reading, the streets he once walked, the smell of coffee at Margaret's old bakery. Each word was a fragile shard of peace they tried to piece together into something resembling hope. When dawn spilled through the window, Lucas rose. "I have to go." She caught his hand. "Where?" "To find the man in the photo." "Elijah." He nodded. "If he's alive, I need to know why and why they used you to reach me." She wanted to stop him, to tell him she was afraid, that every time he left felt like the world cracked a little more. But instead of tears, she whispered, "Then promise me one thing." "What?" "No matter what happens, you'll come back." Lucas looked at her for a long, lingering moment. Then he nodded. "I promise." When the door closed, Katherine stood still, her fingers curled around the silver ring. His warmth still lingered on her skin. She knew that promise wasn't an ordinary one, but a vow shared between two souls walking the edge of life and death. Outside, the sun climbed higher, brushing light across the glass towers. Amid the awakening city, she realized she had just traded the one thing she couldn't afford to lose, safety, for something far more fragile, faith. And Lucas, stepping into the pale morning below, did not look back. He knew that if he did, he wouldn't be able to leave. For the first time in years, he was afraid. Not of dying, but of breaking his promise. As the city began to stir, the man without a past walked into the mist of dawn, carrying with him a love newly lit and a destiny waiting to consume them both. Fog wrapped the New York night like a shroud. The wind from the Hudson carried a blade of cold, cutting through the narrow streets flickering with scattered light. In an abandoned parking lot on the city's southern edge, Lucas Hayes leaned against his car, eyes fixed on the figure walking toward him, slow, deliberate, as if every step might be a trap. The man stopped beneath a dim lamp. For a fleeting second, Lucas thought he was staring into the mirror of his past. Elijah! The other man smiled faintly. His face was eerily familiar, the same gray eyes, though deeper, darker. Didn't think you'd still recognize me? Elijah said with a trace of irony. 15 years is a long time. 15 years, Lucas replied slowly, since you killed our parents? Elijah chuckled, not denying it, not confirming. I didn't kill them. Lucas, I just chose to survive differently than you did. The wind stirred, carrying dust and dry leaves across the ground. Two brothers, two shadows of the same bloodline standing only a few feet apart, yet divided by a lifetime. You disappeared, Lucas said, left me buried under rubble and lies. I mourned you like a ghost. And now you plan to bury me again. Elijah's smile sharpened. Don't pretend you're the righteous one, little brother. We both live off the dark. The difference, Lucas said, his gaze cold as steel, is that I still know where the line is. Elijah took a step closer, voice dropping low. The line, huh? Then tell me, how do you explain her? Lucas stiffened. Elijah, he warned quietly. Don't bring her into this. Oh, I see. The woman who made the Hayes Empire tremble with one glance. Don't you think it's poetic? Our mother died for love, now you're repeating her mistake. Lucas's fists clenched, but he stayed silent. Elijah laughed softly. What does she think you are? Lucas, a lost romantic caught in the storm, or a killer dressing up honor as redemption. She's nothing like you, Lucas said, voice rough. No, Elijah replied, eyes gleaming. She's like our mother, and you're just like father. It always circles back to the same ending. A metallic sound cut the air, the unmistakable click of a gun. Lucas drew first. Elijah didn't flinch, only lifted his empty hands and smirked. You were always faster, but you never had the guts to pull the trigger first. Lucas's eyes wavered for just a second. Because you're still my brother. Elijah grinned. And that's your greatest weakness. A sudden flash of headlights, the hum of an engine approaching. Lucas turned instinctively. When he looked back, Elijah was gone, his voice echoing from the darkness. Next time we meet, bring the woman you love. I want to see if you can save her from your fate. As Lucas drove away from the docks, a storm brewed inside him, one without a name. The city lights blurred past, slicing through his thoughts like knives. Katherine's face kept appearing, her steady eyes, her quiet voice. No matter what happens, you have to come back. He had promised, but promises could be the cruelest cages of all. Meanwhile, in Tribeca, Katherine sat before her computer, editing a series of photos for her new project, Hidden Faces of the City. Each image told a story, but when she reached the final one, Lucas's face, half in light, half in shadow, her heart tightened. The phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Sullivan, a man's voice. Professional. Distant. I'm calling from the New York Bulletin. We've received a file related to the Brooklyn Charity Project. It appears the anonymous sponsor you interviewed may be linked to money laundering. Katherine froze. What did you just say? The name signed on the documents was L.H. Lucas Hayes. The phone slipped from her hand. Her chest constricted as if someone had reached in and crushed her heart. She didn't want to believe it. Lucas could hide, could lie, but he could not be evil. She believed in his eyes, the eyes of someone who knew what loss meant. But belief is fragile. When cracked, it shatters faster than glass. She reopened her computer and searched for Hayes Foundation. One line stopped her cold-funded through the Phoenix group directed by Elijah Hayes. Her hands trembled. Elijah! The same name she'd seen in the photograph, the man standing across from Lucas. If Elijah was alive, then everything, the explosion, their parents' deaths, Every secret Lucas had buried could be something far darker than she'd imagined. That night, Katherine went to Margaret's oven. The old woman looked up from cleaning the counter. "Trouble with that boy again, dear." Katherine didn't answer directly. "Do you know anything about his past?" Margaret sighed. "Only that he carries more ghosts than anyone I've ever met. The first time he came here, his hands were bleeding. Said he just wanted bread. But I knew people only look for the smell of bread when they're trying to forget the smell of sin." Katherine hesitated. "Did he ever talk about his parents?" "He said his father died protecting the woman he loved, and he swore he'd never let that tragedy repeat." Katherine stepped back into the cold. The streets were nearly empty. The lamps shimmered against wet asphalt. She pulled out her phone and called Lucas. No answer. She tried again, and again. Still silence. Then a message. "Don't look for me, Katherine. If you see me again, it means everything's already too late." The phone slipped from her grasp as tears blurred her vision. Across the city, Lucas sat in a darkened room. Before him was a metal box. He opened it. Inside lay old files, photographs, and a silver gun engraved with 3 slashed marks. On top was a picture of Elijah, smiling beside a young woman, Katherine. His chest tightened. He understood. Elijah was coming for her, using her to pull him back into the underworld he'd left behind. His brother's taunt echoed in his mind. "Next time we meet, bring the woman you love," Lucas's jaw said. There was no choice left. If he didn't go to Elijah, Katherine would pay the price. Before dawn, fog blanketed the harbor. Lucas walked toward an old, abandoned ship, the place where everything had begun. Golden light flickered on the black water. On the deck, Elijah waited. "I knew you'd come," he said softly, almost welcoming. "You never stop orchestrating, do you?" Lucas replied. "I can't, because you never learned how to save yourself." Elijah raised a black pistol. "Give her to me, and this ends here." Lucas's voice was steady. "You don't touch her. So you're ready to die for her?" Lucas met his eyes. "If that's what it takes for her to live?" "Yes." The shot rang out, one short, sharp sound splitting the fog. Birds scattered into the dawn. When the echo faded, Elijah fell. Lucas stood motionless, smoke rising from the silver gun in his hand. He didn't tremble, but his eyes burned with grief. "I'm sorry, brother," he whispered. He knelt, placing the gun beside Elijah's still body. Light caught his face quiet, exhausted, hollow. His lips moved once more, barely a breath against the cold air. "I promised you, Katherine, I'll come back." But deep down, he knew. Every promise carries a price. And this one had just been paid in blood. The morning after the gunfire, the city lay under a blanket of fog. Headlines stretched across the front page of every paper. Body found at Brooklyn Dock. Possible link to the Hayes Empire? No one mentioned Lucas. No one knew if he was dead or alive. Only Katherine, sitting in her dimly lit apartment, stared at the silver ring on her finger. She turned it slowly, the cold metal glinting in the light, and suddenly noticed something she hadn't before: a tiny engraving inside the band, 3 interlocked slashes. Delicate and precise, like a coded symbol. She held it closer to the lamp. Beneath the etching was a slit so fine it revealed a minuscule object hidden within something that looked like a microchip. "A transmitter," she whispered. Her hand trembled. If that was true, then Lucas hadn't just given her a ring. He had given her a way for him to know she was safe, or to find her if things went wrong. The window rattled as a helicopter passed overhead. News of the explosion spread fast, and fear trickled through every corner of the city. Katherine opened her laptop, digging through archived security footage near the docs files she'd once hacked for an old investigation. A blurry frame, flashing lights, smoke swirling like ghosts, and then a shadowed figure walking away from the fire. The side profile, she recognized it instantly. Lucas? He was alive. She jumped to her feet, grabbed her coat, and bolted for the door. Her footsteps echoed down the hall, the sound of a heart too restless to stay still. But as she reached the end of the corridor, someone blocked her path. Miss Sullivan? A man in a black suit, earpiece glinting, stood squarely in front of her. "You'll need to come with us." "Who are you?" "People who want to keep you safe. And if you don't cooperate," he said calmly, "others will find you first and they won't be so kind." Katherine backed up, ready to run until a voice behind her froze her in place. "Easy, Katherine, they're with me." "Lucas?" He stepped out of the shadowed hallway, tall, pale, exhaustion etched into his features, his shoulder still wrapped in a blood-stained bandage. She stared at him, unable to speak, torn between disbelief and relief, between wanting to hit him and wanting to hold him. He gestured for the men to leave before turning to her. "You shouldn't be out here alone." "You have no right to say that," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought you were dead." "I almost was." You promised you'd come back. And I'm here now. She looked straight at him, tears welling, but her voice sharp as glass. No, you're not the same man who sat across from me in that bakery. You carry someone else's blood now. And secrets? Lucas fell silent. His gaze dropped to her hand, the silver ring glinting faintly on her finger. So you found it? That's why you gave it to me, wasn't it, to track me? No, he said softly. To save you, if I had to. They walked through the city in silence. The morning light was weak, filtered through a haze that dulled every color. Lucas led her into an abandoned building by the river, a temporary base where he had been hiding for months.
Katherine sat on a worn wooden chair, watching him unwrap the bandage on his shoulder. The gauze was soaked through. The wound deep, yet he didn't flinch. He'd learned long ago how to bleed quietly.
I know about Elijah, she said. I know you killed him. Lucas closed his eyes briefly. I had no choice. There it is again, she snapped. You always say that as if killing is the only way to protect what's good. He didn't argue. His hands, resting on the table, tightened until his knuckles whitened. Do you think I wanted this? He said finally, his voice raw. Elijah wasn't my brother anymore. He threatened you, used you as bait. If I hadn't pulled the trigger, you'd be the one dead. And now that he's gone, are you at peace? Lucas looked up. In his gray eyes, she saw something unbearable, not guilt, not anger, but emptiness. No, he said, but if it meant your life, I'd do it again.
Silence filled the room. The faint sound of the river echoed through the cracked windows.
Katherine rose and walked toward him. You really think you can hide forever? The news is everywhere. They're calling you a traitor, a brother who killed for power. Lucas gave a quiet, bitter laugh. People need a story. I gave them one. And what about me? I don't need a story. I need the truth. He looked at her, eyes soft but resolute. I can't pull you in any deeper, Katherine. They've been tracking you. That ring doesn't just send a signal to me, it sends one to them. You're the bait now. She froze. What are you saying? The chip transmits both ways. The moment you found it, they might have traced it. You're not safe anymore. Her breath quickened. You knew that and still let me wear it. I had no other choice. I needed to know where you were to protect you.
Or to control me.
Lucas said nothing. He took a step closer, voice low and tired. You don't understand. My world doesn't have freedom, only survival and loss.
And love, she asked, almost a whisper. Where does love fit in your world?
He looked up. The faint light caught his eyes, beautiful, but broken. Between two bullets? Her throat tightened. She turned away, staring out the window at a city too bright, too indifferent to the two souls teetering between right and wrong. What will you do now, she asked. Leave New York. There's a transport line tied to the Phoenix group. I'll end it, then disappear. And leave me behind. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both apology and resignation. It's the only way you'll stay safe. Safe? Her voice cracked, tears glistening. If I lose you, I'll never be safe again. Lucas hesitated. His hand rose halfway, stopping in midair as if he feared that touching her would make him stay. Don't say that, he murmured. You make every choice I thought was right feel like a mistake. Katherine pressed a trembling hand against his chest, over the wound that hadn't healed. Then let me make that mistake with you. A sudden gust slammed the door open. From the distance came sirens, ambulance, police, and something heavier, darker. The city was bracing for another reckoning. Lucas turned sharply, eyes narrowing. They've found us. Who? Phoenix. They're not leaving survivors. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back stairwell. Footsteps thundered above them. Flashlight beams slashed through the cracked walls.
Katherine's heart pounded as they ran not from fear, but from the desperate truth that love was something the world should never be allowed to find.
They hid in a basement utility room. Lucas knelt by the wall, pulling a small device from his coat, a locator. The ring. He said, give it to me. She slipped it off and placed it in his palm. He stared at it for a second, then sliced the chip open with his knife. The signal's dead. They can't track you now. And you? I've never needed to hide. She understood instantly he was going to stay behind, to draw them away from her. No, I'm not letting you do that. It's not your choice, he said, smiling faintly, a smile full of pain and peace. You asked me once where love exists in my world. It's right here. He kissed her. A kiss without tomorrow, fierce, desperate, and full of goodbye. The sound of boots echoed closer. Lucas shoved her into a hidden crawl space, closing the steel panel between them. She pounded on it, voice breaking. Lucas. No answer.
Only the metallic thud of the door locking, followed by silence.
In the darkness, Katherine pressed her hand to her lips. They still carried the taste of his kiss. The ring lay cold and hollow in her palm, no chip, no signal. Nothing left to trace. But she knew somewhere in this vast, brutal city, his heart was still sending the only signal no one could intercept the pulse of a promise not yet fulfilled. Dawn was nearing.
New York had not yet fully awakened its skyline, half shrouded in fog, half bathed in the pale light of morning.
Rain from the night before still clung to the window panes, glittering like tears that had not quite fallen. Katherine sat on the cold concrete floor, her back against the steel wall. She had pounded on the hidden door until her hands bled. No one answered. Only footsteps, gunfire, then silence vast and final. When it was over, she collapsed to the ground, her breathing ragged, tears falling soundlessly. Maybe he was gone.
Or worse, maybe he had done what he always feared most, vanished to keep his promise.
When they found her hours later, Katherine said nothing. The police questioned her, journalists asked, but she remained silent. The headlines spread quickly.
Lucas Hayes, prime suspect in Phoenix Group, internal purge missing, presumed dead.
Some said he'd died in the explosion. Others said he'd fled overseas. No one spoke of love. 3 weeks passed.
Katherine returned to Margaret's oven, out of habit more than hope, though she knew no one would be waiting at the corner table by the window anymore.
Margaret greeted her with that same gentle smile, but there was something knowing in her eyes. He's not dead, you know. Katherine looked up. You know that. Margaret rested a hand on her shoulder. Some people only disappear so the right person will come looking for them. That day, snow fell softly outside. As Katherine left the bakery, Margaret pressed a gray envelope into her hand. Someone dropped this off this morning, she said. No return address, just your name. Inside was a folded piece of paper, written in a familiar, slightly slanted hand. If you're reading this, it means I kept my promise. I'm no longer in New York, but I see the city every day through the eyes you left behind. I did what had to be done. Elijah is gone. Phoenix is gone. But in this world, no one ever truly walks free. I chose the only way I know to leave, before it pulls you down too. Don't look for me, because the man you're looking for may no longer be the one you loved. L. The note was brief, the ink smudged, the letters shaky, as if written in the rain.
At the bottom, his signature 3 interlaced slashes, the same mark engraved inside the ring.
Katherine held the letter for a long time. Everything seemed to dissolve into the winter air memories. His voice, his embrace, his promise. But the pain no longer tore at her. It had softened, turned into a quiet ache, the kind that lingers like a song you can't quite forget. That evening, she went home and opened an old hard drive filled with photographs from her years behind the lens. Hundreds of faces, hundreds of fleeting moments. Yet among them, only one face ever looked back at her Lucas. Lucas in the bakery? Lucas in the rain? Lucas in the darkened room, where his gaze had been the only light she trusted. She zoomed in on one photo, his faint, barely there smile. Her fingers brushed the screen as though touching what was left of his soul. You're not gone, she whispered. You're just somewhere I'm not brave enough to see yet. Spring came. The rain turned gentler, the sunlight warmer.
Katherine accepted a teaching position at a small art school in Brooklyn, the same one supported years ago by Lucas's anonymous foundation.
One afternoon, while showing her students how to focus a lens, a little boy came up holding a silver bracelet. Miss Katherine, he said, a man gave this to me. He said it's for you. Her pulse stopped. What man? I don't know. He was wearing a hat, the boy replied. But he had gray eyes.
The bracelet was small, delicate, engraved with 3 fine slashes.
She clutched it in her hand, tears spilling before she could stop them. Lucas was still out there. Not near, perhaps but not far enough for her to stop believing they shared the same sky.
Months passed. Katherine began a new photo project, The Ones Who Vanish. She wandered through the city, photographing the streets he had walked, the corners they had paused at, the bakery, the bridges overlooking the river. He wasn't in any of them. Yet in every frame, she could feel him standing somewhere just beyond the lens, watching. The final photo was taken at sunset, the Hudson River, glowing gold under the fading light. On the railing of the bridge, she carved 3 tiny slashes, the symbol of a promise. A year later, Katherine opened her first solo exhibition at a small gallery in Soho.
The opening was crowded friends, students, reporters. But the photograph that drew the longest gaze was titled Manhattan in Fog, a Lone Silhouette Facing Away. Distant, blurred with a small caption below. Some people exist only in memory, but that memory shines bright enough to light an entire lifetime. As the night wound down, Katherine stepped out to the back terrace of the gallery, inhaling the soft rain that had begun to fall. Across the street, through the moving crowd, she glimpsed a tall figure in a gray coat and hat. He didn't look at her. But just before turning away, He lifted his head slightly, the streetlight catching a pair of unmistakable gray eyes. Then he was gone, swallowed by the city.
Katherine stood there a long while, the silver bracelet warm in her palm. A breeze stirred, carrying a whisper. She could almost hear his voice, low and steady, drifting through the night air. I promised you, Katherine.
That night, the city slept more quietly than usual. In her small apartment, Katherine opened her laptop and began to write the first line of her next photo book. Some people enter our lives not to stay, but to teach us that love, even when lost, is simply another form of hope. She smiled, a single tear falling onto the keyboard. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of coffee and bread, the fragrance of a morning long past. And somewhere, among the millions of heartbeats of the city, one familiar rhythm still pulsed for her, steady, unending, and alive.
When the city sleeps, their love stays awake.
No longer bound by promises or signals. Only two hearts that once lost each other, now breathing in unison with the dawn. It was an autumn night. The New York sky was dark as velvet, heavy with fog. Katherine sat in a dimly lit room, the glow from her desk lamp tracing her face, delicate, yet unyielding. On the table lay Lucas's letter, creased, its ink fading at the corners. She no longer reread it. She didn't need to. Every word had carved itself into her memory like a mark beneath the skin. Yet lately, an uncanny feeling had begun to stir inside her, as if someone was watching her from afar. Not with menace, but with a quiet, familiar tenderness that made her heart ache. Since her exhibition, Katherine Sullivan had become a name whispered through the art world. Interviews, collaborations, even a nomination for Photographer of the Year. She smiled, answered, thanked, yet it all felt like a silent performance. Inside, a hollow space remained, untouchable. Every night, she returned to her old apartment, opened her laptop, and looked through the unfinished photographs Lucas had taken before he vanished. None of them were complete frames without focus, bodies without faces, stories without endings.
As if he had left them undone on purpose, waiting for her to finish them.
One night, while sorting through the files, she found a hidden folder named L. Vox. It was password protected. 3 slashes. She typed. The file opened. It contained a single audio clip. Lucas's voice, rough, exhausted, but steady. If you're hearing this, it means I'm no longer somewhere you can find. I didn't leave out of fear, but because of another promise, the one I made to my father before he died. He told me, if the past ever comes back, to save the person I love by walking away.
I used to believe love meant staying, but now I know sometimes love means disappearing at the right moment, so the other person can live.
He paused, then continued, softer, like a confession whispered into the dark. I never told you the whole truth. Elijah didn't die from my bullet. He triggered the bomb beneath the cargo deck himself. I could only save one person. And that person wasn't him.
I chose to save you.
The earphones slipped from her hand. Her heart pounded, tears spilled unchecked. She didn't know whether to cry because he had lied or because he had carried a guilt that wasn't his, just to keep her safe. You fool, she whispered. You always found the most painful way to love. A week later, she received an invitation to exhibit her work in Paris. It should have been a dream come true, but dreams without him felt hollow. Before her flight, she went to the old harbor, the site of the explosion, where everything had begun. The wind was cold, the metallic scent of the river unchanged. The wall where she had carved 3 slashes years ago was still there, fading with time. She reached out to touch it, and under the dim lamplight saw something wedged between the stones, a small oilcloth-wrapped box. Inside was a brown leather notebook, the initials K.S., embossed on the cover in Lucas's handwriting. The first page contained only 2 lines. If you're reading this, don't ask why I left. Ask why I ever stayed. The following pages were fragments, not letters, but thoughts, pieces of a soul she had never fully known. The first day I met you, you looked straight into my eyes without fear. That was the first time I ever wanted to be seen. I used to think love was a luxury reserved for those without sins. But you made me believe even men like me could be forgiven if we learned how to be gentle. If I die, remember it's not fate that took me. I left because I loved you enough not to turn you into a casualty of my life. By the final page, her tears had soaked through the paper.
There was only one line, hurried and uneven.
If you ever want to find me, don't look at the sky. Look at the light you create. That night, she went home and turned on every light in her apartment. The glow spilled through the glass, spreading into the street below. Katherine sat by the window, her heart full of grief. Yes, but also of peace. Because she knew that somewhere, wherever he was, that light would reach him. 3 months later, Paris.
Katherine walked into the grand hall of the International Photography Exhibition.
Glass ceilings shimmered with reflections of gold and silver light. Her collection, Whispers of Light, filled an entire gallery a story of love, guilt, and redemption. At the center hung her largest piece, The Harbor Before Dawn. It showed the old dock before sunrise, a faint silver streak cutting across the dark water, like the last signal of a soul not yet gone. People stood before it for a long time. Someone asked, "What is that light?" Katherine smiled faintly. It's the proof that light doesn't need to be near to be seen. When the opening ended, she stepped out onto the second-floor balcony, looking over the square bathed in Parisian lights. A street musician's guitar echoed below a melody tender, haunting, achingly familiar. She turned. In the corner, half in shadow, half in light, sat a man playing that song. A gray scarf, a hat. When he lifted his head, his ashen gray eyes met hers. Her heart stopped. He didn't speak. He only smiled a small, fragile smile, as though afraid to break the moment. She walked toward him, neither rushing nor hesitating. When only a few steps remained, Lucas stood and removed his hat. He was thinner, the scar on his cheek faint, but his eyes, those same eyes that carried both love and guilt, hadn't changed. "You," her voice trembled. "I didn't mean to frighten you," he said, his voice husky but warm. "I just wanted to see you again, in the light."
Katherine laughed softly through her tears. "You always find the perfect time to disappear, and to come back just when I've learned to breathe again."
He paused, then said quietly, "Maybe because your heart is the only place I never left." They stood there surrounded by wind, light, and the hum of life. No words followed. They didn't need them? Old promises, old wounds, lost years all faded in the silence between their joined hands. Lucas took her hand, pressing it into his palm. No ring, no signal, only warmth. "I've learned something," he murmured. "Love isn't disappearing to protect someone. Love is staying, no matter how afraid you are." Katherine looked up, her eyes reflecting the lights of Paris. "Then don't go again." He smiled, soft as breath. "Not this time, not ever again." In the distance, church bells rang slow, clear, resonant. And there, amidst the sound of the city and the glow of 1,000 lights, two souls who had once been lost found each other again, not in safety, but in peace. She rested her head on his shoulder. He held her close, their breaths blending like the final note of a song that had waited years to end. They had walked through darkness, and now, at last, they stood in the light of forgiveness. And so, in a city of millions of lonely hearts, two of them remained quietly in love, needing no proof, no signals, only the simple act of breathing together beneath the dawn. It was the second winter since the night they found each other again.
Paris had changed its coat, the city wrapped in soft snow. The golden lights along the Champs-Élysées, glowing like streams of memories being gently warmed. Katherine stood by the 7th-floor window of their small apartment, watching the square below where lovers held hands, where laughter dissolved into the cold air. On the table beside her sat Lucas's old camera. It wasn't on, yet the tiny indicator light still glowed like a heart still beating in silence. Behind her, Lucas was making coffee. Steam rose, carrying the rich scent of roasted beans mixed with the faint smell of rain left on the rooftops. He placed a cup in front of her. "You still shoot at sunrise?" "Yes," she said softly. "I'm afraid of missing the first light of the day." He smiled. "I spent most of my life in the dark, so every light feels like my first." She looked at him, no longer the haunted man of years ago. The scars had faded, his gaze gentler, calmer, the kind of tenderness only found in someone who had walked through hell and decided to stay on Earth, just to love. They left Paris the following spring, when wild roses bloomed along the Seine. Katherine had accepted a position as art director for a humanitarian photography project. Lucas agreed to go with her, not to hide, but to begin anew. "Aren't you afraid someone will recognize you?" she asked as they walked through Gare de Lyon.
"No," he said. "A man who once feared the light has now learned to walk inside it. If anyone asks, I'll tell them I was someone who lost everything and found it again through love." She smiled. "And if they ask who that love was?" He met her eyes, and inside them was spring itself. "The one who taught me how to live without running." By May, they arrived in the south of France, where lavender fields stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Lucas rebuilt a small house on a hill, draped in white vines. Katherine turned the sunroom facing the garden into her studio. Every morning, they rose before dawn, she to photograph, he to write. His pages no longer spoke of darkness or guilt, but of the people who are saved by a single glance and the forgiveness that needs no words. "Writing," he told her, "is the only way I know to repay the world and you." And Katherine, every time she lifted her camera, saw something new in her frame. Light no longer had to be found. It came on its own, because she had finally become a place for it to rest. One late summer afternoon, The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and dried flowers. Lucas was sketching on the porch, a habit he'd learned after he stopped carrying guns.
Katherine sat nearby, editing a new photograph, him laughing under the sunlight. "I used to think my life should only ever be shot in grayscale," he murmured. "But you made me believe there are colors you only see when you're loved."
She smiled. "I didn't do anything. Lucas, I just stayed." He reached over and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Sometimes," he whispered, "staying is the bravest thing." By autumn, their home had become a gathering place for young photographers. Katherine taught. Lucas told stories not of guilt, but of rebirth, of people who learned to start again after losing everything. During the last class, a student asked, "Do you believe love can save someone?" Katherine smiled, glancing out the window where Lucas was trimming lavender. "No," she said gently. "Love doesn't save us. It just gives us a reason to live." That evening, after everyone left, they sat on the porch beneath the golden light, 2 glasses of wine between them. "Do you ever regret trusting me?" Lucas asked. She tilted her head, eyes deep and calm. "If I had to choose again, I'd still trust you because that's how I learned the courage of the heart." He smiled faintly, then handed her an envelope. "I finished the manuscript. I want you to be the first to read it." She opened it. On the first page, in his handwriting, was the title, The Last Light. She read the opening lines and stopped, tears gathering at the corner of her eyes. They say every great love must die once. But if it's still breathing afterward, then it's not just love, it's proof of life. She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "You wrote this for me." "For us," he said, "and for everyone who ever believed they weren't worthy of love." She leaned her head on his shoulder, letting the wind pass through the vines. The candle on the table flickered, and in that light, their shadows on the wall merged almost as one. A year later, The Last Light was published and became a quiet phenomenon, not because of fame, but because of truth. It told the story of a man who lived in darkness and the woman who taught him to believe in light. People read it, fell silent, and found fragments of themselves between its lines. Katherine was invited to speak at the New York book launch, the city that had once torn them apart, now bringing them home. She stood on stage, looking down at the front row where Lucas sat, his gaze warm as an old lamp in the night. "This book," she said, "doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to 2 hearts that once lost each other but chose not to give up." Then she smiled, because sometimes the last light doesn't come from the sky. It comes from the hand holding yours. For a moment, the room was still, then applause rose like rain. That night, they walked along 5th Avenue, city lights glimmering on wet pavement. Katherine stopped outside a bookstore window where a poster of Lucas's book cover hung beneath the glow. She smiled and whispered, "You've been chosen by the light. Lucas Hayes." He touched her cheek, his voice soft. "No, Katherine Sullivan, you are the light." Far off, the church bells struck 12. The city fell quiet. Only 2 people stood there after all the losing, all the finding finally moving to the same heartbeat. On the rooftops, the first snow of the season began to fall light as breath. Katherine looked up as his hand found hers. They smiled at each other, the smile of those who had lost everything, yet still chose to believe in the gentlest thing of all love. If you've ever been afraid to love because of your past, remember, no one is born to live forever in the dark. Be brave enough to open your heart, because only when you let someone in can the light find its way home. And perhaps, when you think you've lost everything, that's when love truly begins.